Cigarette packs in the US carry text warning labels that remained unchanged since 1994. Because the warnings had grown stale and were no longer effective, the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, developed 9 pictorial warnings for cigarette packages and advertisements, as mandated by the US Congress. In response, tobacco companies sued the FDA, claiming that the pictorial warnings violated the company's First Amendment free speech rights. And the court found these 9 warnings unconstitutional. One of the reasons for that was that the court found that the graphic warnings do not constitute purely factual and uncontroversial information. The court never defined what purely factual and uncontroversial speech is, but alluded that textual messages are factual and pictures, because they're inherently emotional, are not. We set out to test whether there are differences in how informational or factual consumers perceive textual and pictorial labels to be, and how much emotions they evoke. We created 81 labels, pictorial and textual, in a variety of forms. Some showed gruesome consequences of tobacco use, such as oral cancer. Others portrayed effects of smoking in graphs. Textual messages were used as well, with some showing statistics and others mentioning the smoker's loved ones. We also used stories of real people. Participants were 1,836 US adults, never smokers, current smokers, and transitioning smokers, which are those who either quit in the past 2 years or are currently trying to quit. Each participant saw 9 labels. After seeing each label, they reported to what extent the label was informative, portrayed actual risk of smoking, was based on facts, and so on, which was combined into a perceived informativeness scale. They also reported their emotions. For example, how sad, angry, worried, guilty they were when they were looking at the label, which was combined into a single emotion scale. What we found was there was no difference in ratings of informativeness between text and pictorial labels. There were no differences when we looked at all participants together and when we examined never smokers, current smokers, and transitioning smokers separately. Participants felt slightly higher levels of emotions in the pictorial labels, and there were also significant positive correlations between emotion and informativeness. So, US courts interpreted textual warnings on cigarettes as factual information and pictorial warnings as unabashed attempts to evoke emotion, implying a dichotomy between facts and emotion. Several legal scholars criticized the court's decision that emotional pictures should not be allowed as informative disclosures. This paper provides empirical evidence that further challenges the court's conclusion. This study demonstrated that, in contrast to the court's assertion, consumers in the US perceive both textual and pictorial labels as factual and informational. Both textual and pictorial labels evoke emotion, and the informativeness and emotions of warning labels were highly correlated. In defending the next set of warning labels, the FDA can use our evidence to argue that any communication of information about health consequences of tobacco is, by its nature, emotional, but that such a finding should not render a warning any less factual or uncontroversial.